There was a great story the other day, an op-ed in the New York Times about Paul Ryan and just this entire Republican conservative push attacking the people who are in poverty. And you should, keep in mind that people drop in and out of poverty all the time. There is not a group of people who are always poor. The vast majority of people dip below the poverty line and then dip back above it, and this notion that somehow poverty is a function of culture, that people become poor because of some type of cultural perspective or work ethic or lack of work ethic, or just desire to just hang out, and that's what makes them poor. This notion that we don't want to create a culture of dependency or encourage a culture of dependency by helping people who have no money create some type of floor in which they have at least a minimum amount of food or a minimum amount of housing or a minimum amount of money from which to function as a platform to build some means in which they will pay for their health care or feed their kids or get good housing. And Timothy Egan the other day had a piece in the New York Times talking about the notion that Paul Ryan, who was a grandchild, I guess, or great-great-grandfather of Irish immigrants, whose great-great-grandfather came to this country in the mid-1800s as a result of Ireland's Great Famine. And he raises the point that the British at that time had massive stores of food, and they refused to release this to the Irish for the very reason that Paul Ryan suggests that we should not have a social safety net. And that is the fear of the British, or the English, I guess I should say, that charity would upset the free market and that it would leave the Irish dependent and unable to care for themselves. There was a quote from Sir Charles Trevelyan, who I guess was the minister of the provinces at the time. And he writes, or he's declared apparently, dependence on charity is not to be made an agreeable mode of life. We don't want to create a hammock, in other words. And there's not much else to that story, but it is so indicative. And, we spoke to Mike Consul yesterday about this notion of voluntarism. The idea that in the absence of government intervention, just the goodwill of wealthy people would make up for what those least fortunate in society need. And Consul wrote that, there was never this time in this country where we simply relied on private charity to take care of people without any government assistance. And B, that when we did have that sort of complementary system, it was overwhelmed by need in the Great Depression. And as ineffective as it was even prior to the Great Depression, it took something like just a massive amount of suffering to create the political will to change that. And he also included in that piece, Eisenhower's notion of what we should perceive as charity, and one that we should also, as liberals, be conscious of, that charity isn't about people who have money giving it to people who don't. Charity is simply about goodwill towards your fellow man or woman. And goodwill does not inhibit having all of us contribute to a system which ensures that all of us can live at least a modicum of a decent life. And it animates so much of our politics now.